And our first speaker here is Ettore Randazzo, and joint work with Alexander Mordvintsev on simulating an artificial biome of plants with Biomaker CA.
Maker. Yeah. People read it different every time. Okay, so I'll just start. So in the spirit of the Alive conference, I'm going to show you a lot of videos today. So get ready for that. So what I'm going to talk to you about is Biomaker CA, and I think that it's very nice to first show it with a video. So what you're seeing here is a simulation of a plant biome, and I hope you can see that there are different plant organisms that are growing, starting from a single seed, and then they have, well, to survive, harvest nutrients that you can see from the fact that there's different colors in the air and the soil, and eventually reproduce with variation. I'm going to go into more details for all of those things, but I wanted to give you a sense of what I'm going to talk about. Sorry, this is a thick slide, but the others will not be like this. This is a plant biome simulator that uses cellular automata in general, but I'm going to use neural cellular automata for some agent cells as building blocks. So everything that you see there, at least most of it, is implemented with cellular automaton rules. Their morphogenesis is a first-class citizen, so plants start from a seed and have to grow, survive, and reproduce. There is no explicit pressure to do anything there, but what we want to see is biomes that don't go extinct. So there's going to be a lot of experiments where I just try to say what are the initial conditions for plants to evolve and never go extinct, or try to minimize the chance that they do go extinct. So this is a framework. Like, I don't know what is best. So what we try to do is we give some freedom to do whatever they want. With this system, you can create custom environments, material types, change the level of physics, create custom architectures for the logic of the agent, so the individual cells that act to the environment. Also create custom mutation strategies. Ultimately, whatever you want. And you can just let them evolve or by themselves, so you can use meta evolution or whatever you want. It's entirely implemented in JAX and is optimized for GPU and TPU. You can parallelize simulations very, very easily just by doing essentially JAX.vmap on the function that simulates the environment, which is very convenient for some of the experiments that I will show you. And everything is open source and reproducible with Google Colabs. Like usually, everything that I'm showing today, you can just execute live, like online on a Google Colab. So this is, let's say, a snapshot of the environment, simplified to explain what's going on. You should think about it as a, 2D spatial grid, but every single cell has a lot of states. The most important ones are probably the cell type that tells you what kind of cell it is. It could be a kind of material or a specialization of an agent cell. Material could be like earth, air, or agent cell could be like, is it a root? Is it a leaf? Is it a flower? There are other things, but I think the most important other than that are the nutrients, earth nutrients and air nutrients, because those plants need to use nutrients to survive and also to perform actions. So you need to have usually both earth and air nutrients to do anything and to survive. But as we will see, they can only harvest one of them at most based on their specialization. So they need to communicate and exchange nutrients. And then each agent has an agent ID, which tells them essentially what are the parameters of that cell. This will be plant specific, but I'll explain it in a second. I was talking about different cell types. On the left, you see, like, let's say, material types that I highlight are the soil, the air, so earth head cells, air cells, sun, which is something that generates air nutrients. That's the way that I did it, at least. And the immovable, the black one on the bottom, generates earth nutrients, at least in most of the simulations, and also gives some stability for making things not fall. And then we've got the cell types. Here you say the unspecialized ones, which are the ones where cells start with, and then roots that can harvest earth nutrients from the soil, leaves that can harvest air nutrients from the air, and then flowers, the pink ones, that are the ones that under certain conditions allows for reproduction with variation. So let me show you the life of a simple plant. So this is when I disable reproduction, and you start from a single seed, and you grow a plant that has to survive by growing roots, usually on the ground, and leaves on the air. And these pink flowers are things that if I allowed them to do it, they would be able to be destroyed to generate a new seed in the neighborhood. So I was saying that plants have unique DNAs and they need to reproduce. So first of all, each agent cell has a plant unique respective DNA. So we've got this distinction where you say every single cell is, well, it's unique, but they just share the DNA with all the cells in the same plant. So a plant is a collection of all cells sharing the same DNA. By the way, you can relax that. If you don't like that, you can have like different DNA for the same plant. So a plant ages at each step and it will eventually die. So the only way for them to survive is to reproduce. When they reproduce, this age counter gets set to 0, but not when you create a new cell, only when you reproduce. And when you do that, essentially what we do is we take the DNA of the original plant, we do a mutation operator that you define, and this generates a new mutated cell. Usually here we're talking about like 10,000 parameters that get mutated with something which is similar to a Gaussian distribution, or more complex if you have it adaptive. So now, oh my God, let's hope that this gets solved. Otherwise, it's a problem. Yes, so now we reproduce, and when a cell reproduces, like you will see a pink flower generate a new flower, a new plant on the left. Here, I also make them colored differently slightly so that it's easier for you to understand where one plant starts and one plant ends. And you may also see now here that some plants don't grow as much as others. This can be both because of the DNA being different, but also because they are starved for nutrients, because they are competing with all the other plants in the neighborhood. So, oh my God, this is, I'm sorry. I don't know why, Google Slides. You can create a lot of different environments, as I was saying. So here I'm going to show you just a few of them. On the top left is the first one I showed you, which is a very easy, wide environment. On the right is one which is harder for nutrients-wise, like operations cost much more. On the bottom left is the same as the one on the top left, but the distribution of the materials is different, and this makes the environment much, much harder because now you got much fewer nutrients. And on the bottom right, you can also change completely the size of the environment, and this actually, in this specific case, makes it much harder to create a stable environment. And as you can see, the plants just die. But we will solve it. If I can move on. So I was telling you the superpower of JAX, and this is essentially what you can do with JAX. You just say you have an environment that you want to run, and you just parallelize it however many times you want. And here you can see that sometimes in some specific kind of configurations, the plants die, and sometimes they don't. And this is very useful if you want to do some objective quantitative analysis. So for example, you can use this to compute the average fitness for different configurations. And here I'm showing different environments, which is the config name on the left, different agent architecture. So like what is the, well, in this case, like the deep neural network implemented by your cell. Or different mutation strategies, so adaptive versus, for example, more simple ones, which are static. You can also compute the average number of agents counted and also estimate the extinction chance, which is the one that I focused the most into this paper. So on the right, you can see that some configurations are just easy, that you just have 0% extinction chance, and some of them are much higher. As I will show you later, by the way, plants evolve all the time. So whenever you do this simulation, plants will evolve, and I will show you some evidence about it. This is one of the evidence, I guess. Sometimes in long runs, different architectures and mutations really, really make a difference. So on the left, you have like one kind of strategy. In this case, was adaptive mutation strategy with a small number of parameters. And on the right, you got a different mutator. Different mutation strategy and a much higher number of parameters. And this environment is particularly tricky because it changes by the actions that the plants perform. So you will see that on the right it performs a heal, and one of the two mutation strategies and architecture makes it much, much easier for plants to adapt and survive. This one, it seems like it kind of survived. I think that usually those plants die much later, but yeah, they do evolve. So I was telling you that you can perform meta-evolution. So I call it meta-evolution because, again, in every single simulation, plants evolve by themselves. With meta-evolution, you will just say, simulate an entire run for, let's say, 1,000, 10,000 steps, and then compute a fitness function, for example, number of agents or extinction event. And then you want to essentially do an update based on the sampling that you've done. You can do whatever you want with meta-evolution essentially here. And here there are some examples that shows that you can, for example, have a configuration which is hard, like the pestilence one, and make it so they don't get extinct anymore. The second row is probably very interesting, which is called extracted. This just means I took one run where it didn't go extinct by chance. So in the default one is 43% extinction chance. I said, what happens if I take something which didn't get extinct and put it back into the environment? And it showed that it has a much lower chance of getting extinct afterwards. And this is a very empirical evidence that there is evolution during the time of simulation. And then there are different ways that I did the meta-evolution that I will show maybe later. But I think it's cooler to show other examples. For example, the tiny world, I was telling you that it's pretty hard to make it become stable, but you can do meta-evolution. And with one method of meta-evolution, I was able to create this much smaller plant, which is much, much more stable. And actually, it's very interesting because it can be used in many different environments that didn't even have anything to do with being small and have some interesting properties of stability. Another thing that we can do is do interactive evolution. So here at the Life conference, we love Pig Breeder. You can do the same for, well, plants. So here I'm showing you many different, let's say, offsprings, and you select the one that you like the most. Is selected by the green rectangle. And essentially, you then mutate this one with, in this case, what is it like, 14 different offspring. And you choose the one that you want to select. Notice that there's written on top the number of reproductions, because otherwise you wouldn't know if it will be infertile. So I'm just telling you, this is the number of successful reproductions that you would have done. And then you can take it and put it into the real virtual world, which is where they actually are allowed to reproduce. And this is definitely work in progress, because usually what happens is that whatever evolution you have selected, very quickly they will find something which is better, and you will lose all the properties that you were interested in. But you know, having research about thinking of what kind of architectures would make this more stable is also interesting. Extra stuff. So we can add lava and fire to the environment by having lava falling from the sky and eventually decaying, and plants, poor plants being destroyed whenever like they touch anything which is not, well, if they're not a root, they would be destroyed by the fire, essentially. On the top, you were seeing the original parameters, the ones that are usually at the initialization. They don't work very well. But on the bottom, instead, you have the one which I was telling you comes from the tiny world, and it works wonderfully. Like, it perfectly survives the lava environment on the right, so it just doesn't die out. And on the left, it survives for a very, very high frequency of lava falling down. And this is very nice for me, because it really showed a complete novel behavior that I didn't expect when I created this like small plants in the other environment. There's more, if I have time. Sexual reproduction. So the first thing I showed you before were plants where they were creating asexual reproduction. It was just a random mutation. And the color yellowish of these new flowers instead is sexual reproduction, which means that you actually have to have essentially at the same time two plants of different sex wanting to reproduce. And then when they do a crossing over operation, and then there's a mutation on top of that. And the behavior is very different. markedly different. Now, I don't have time to explore it in more details, but if you're curious, asexual reproduction wins here, but you can have different behaviors with sexual reproduction. And final extra, I'm going to show, if we have time in our tutorial on Friday, how to create your own materials as an example on how to use JAX. And here, for example, I'm creating a world full of rain. I disabled the nutrient generation from the bottom of Earth. So now the nutrients are only generated when the rain falls and touches the ground. And this is one variation that you can do very easily by just like very few lines of code. Of course, the code base is not very few lines of code, but modifying this is. And with that, if you're interested in more, as I was saying, with Bertrand, we're going to have a tutorial on JAX for scaling AI life, and I'm going to use some part of Biomaker CA to show some advanced examples. Everything is open source and reproducible. We do welcome contributions. We also have a YouTube channel where at the moment, I show only Biomaker CA content, but there's a lot of more curated videos there, and you can contact me however you want. Thank you.